We're here today with Jamie Shaw, the president of the Canadian Association of Medical Cannabis Dispensaries, and we're here to talk about a recent string of enforcement actions by RCMP around the province. Within the last week, the RCMP have executed search warrants on at least 5 different marijuana dispensaries in 3 different parts of the province, and another 5 dispensaries in another part of the province received notice about future possible actions. So, Jamie, what do you think about the events of the last week?
Well, I mean, it highlights one of the problems with prohibition that's always existed is the uneven enforcement of cannabis laws in general, but it's also kind of disturbing right now when we're looking at regulating dispensaries. There's lots of municipalities that have been effectively able to deal with their dispensaries through regulations. So to see such large police expenditures right now at a time when we're looking at trying to integrate that seems a little strange.
And we also spoke with Cash Heed, who's a former drug cop and former politician, and who's now consulting with marijuana businesses. He said he applauds this action by the RCMP, and he thinks that we're going to see more of it. And he thinks that if we're going to have legalized, regulated marijuana for both medicinal and recreational use, we need to weed out the black market. And he sees this as a step towards doing that. And he thinks we're going to see a lot more of these kinds of actions. What do you think of that?
If it was focused and targeted, that would be great, except it's not. It's blanket, and that's really where the problem is coming in. You know, the city of Vancouver, through their regulations, they're doing background checks to try and address that issue. That, in our minds, is much more effective. I'm a little surprised also to hear Cash Heed say that, because he's been a big supporter of dispensaries, particularly like the BC Compassion Club, for example, and longer-standing dispensaries. So, and he chose the correct route at the time, was to engage and you know, discuss the issues rather than just come by and close down everybody. Right?
The Vancouver police have said that it's not a high priority for them. They want to focus their resources when there are serious public safety risks or evidence of people selling to minors or things like that. What do you think about the VPD's approach?
I think it's been fairly effective. I mean, there's people point to the number of dispensaries in Vancouver. However, most of those have only been in since the MMPR, and the growth outside of Vancouver has been much more massive than what's happened within the city. Within the city, there's been concerns. They've closed those dispensaries down. We heard of the 176 applicants of all the dispensaries in the city that were existing in Vancouver. Only 2 didn't apply. So they're all willing to follow the rules. They're all willing to engage in the system, and that's how you can actually deal with this from a public health perspective.
So now we've got a federal government in power who had campaigned on a platform of legalizing marijuana. What's going to happen next?
It's so hard to say. It's very contradictory. I mean, when the previous federal government started talking about how dispensaries were illegal on an almost daily basis for a while, that's really what started to accelerate the growth of dispensaries across Canada. So it's the same thing with enforcement. The more money that you spend on enforcement, the more dispensaries you usually end up with. Nanaimo's a perfect example. None of those dispensaries have been shut down. So this was lots of investigations, this was letters, this was a lot of press time. Council's been looking at the issue, and ultimately they haven't achieved anything at all.